Hello, and thank you for joining me. So far in our Oktoberfest series, we have covered some of the most classic items. We've got the bratwurst and the sauerkraut, as well as braised red cabbage and a warm potato salad. But it just wouldn't be a German celebration without that oh-so-iconic, salty, twisted baked good, would it? Today we're talking pretzels.
So let's pop into the kitchen and make some. It's not very complicated. And in addition to the pretzels, we'll also make an easy Bavarian cheese dip to go with them. First, let's get to work on the pretzel dough. I'm giving you the recipe for 12 pretzels, but you will see me making half recipe in the video since I was just cooking for 2 when I filmed this. Don't worry, the methods and techniques are the same. This is a yeasted dough recipe, so let's make sure our yeast is nice and alive. First, let's get 2 teaspoons of yeast in our mixing bowl. And I have here 1.5 cups of warm liquid, about 340 grams worth. I'm doing half water and half beer, a simple, clean lager. See, there's even a time and a place for warm beer. To this liquid, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Now we just mix that up, cover it, and let it stand for about 5 minutes. This gives our yeast a slight head start on getting all fired up. While that yeast mixture is coming up, let's get our dry ingredients together. I have here 3 3/4 cups, about 450 grams worth of bread flour. The extra protein of bread flour really helps these pretzels to achieve that proper chew and taste. To that flour, I'm adding about 4 teaspoons of salt and simply whisking everything together. Now that our yeast and liquid have sat for a few minutes, see some of that foam forming? It's time to go in with our dry ingredients. I'm going to be using my stand mixer, but I want to just bring everything together by stirring it before I use the machine. Once the dry and wet ingredients are roughly mixed, I attach the dough hook and let the mixer run on low speed for about 10 minutes. While it is running, I add 2 tablespoons of melted butter. You could also use vegetable oil if you prefer. I have said before that cooking requires intuition. Even when you measure things out, you might have to adjust. My dough was looking too wet and loose. See how it looks almost like a cake batter instead of a bread dough? So I added a couple generous spoons of flour until it came together a bit more. See how it now clings to the hook in a big clump? That's a good sign. Now I just pop that dough onto the counter, and using a little bit of flour, I work it into a ball. Then I pop that dough ball into a clean bowl that I've sprayed lightly with a non-stick spray. Now we cover that bowl and let it rest in a slightly warm spot in your kitchen. It should rest until it has doubled in size, which should take about an hour.
While that's rising, let's bring a little bit of science into our cooking. Traditionally, the old German bakers would dip their pretzels in a lye solution just before baking. This helped give them that iconic mahogany color. While the idea of using a caustic chemical in cooking may sound strange, don't fear. When made in the traditional fashion, it is quite minimally used, and any lingering chemical is denatured when the pretzels get baked in the oven. That being said, it's not super easy to find lye at the grocery store, but you know what is? Baking soda. And if we take a bit of baking soda and bake it in the oven, we transform it from sodium bicarbonate to sodium carbonate, a slightly more caustic ingredient that closely mimics the effects of the traditional lye.
So I have here some baking soda. I'm making more than I need because I like having it around when I make my own ramen noodles. But let's call that about a cup. I just want to break up those clumps and make sure it's spread out nice and evenly. Now it's into a 180 degrees Celsius, 350 degrees Fahrenheit oven for about 30 minutes. And the transformation should be complete. Set that aside to cool. Now, I think we have just enough time to put our cheese spread together before our dough is ready. Here are the star players: brie, camembert, and butter. in equal amounts. I've got about 4 ounces or 115 grams of each here. I get both of those soft cheeses into a bowl and break them up with a fork. It takes some elbow grease, but you could also take the easy road and use a food processor. Once the cheese is broken up, I go in with my softened butter and work that into the mix. Then for seasoning, I've got a pinch of salt, about a teaspoon of paprika, and a pinch of ground caraway. And since it's still a little thick, and this is a beer hall dish, let's add a couple splashes of beer to loosen things up. Once we have it in a nice spreadable consistency, we can put that in the bowl of our choice. Maybe not the most photo-friendly food, but how about we add a little dusting of paprika and a generous amount of chives. Looking more photogenic already. Back to the dough. It's been about an hour and my pretzel dough has doubled. Now I just get that onto my work surface, dust it with a little bit of flour, knead the air out of it and work it back into a nice ball. Then I use my bench scraper to portion it into 12 approximately equal pieces, 6 in my case because I'm doing a half batch. You can borrow a little dough from some of the bigger ones if necessary. Now for rolling. Keep your dough portions covered and take one to work with. I form it into an approximate log shape and then I roll with flat hands, starting with 1 and then moving to 2, while pressing down and moving my hands more wide as I roll back and forth. Let the center of your rope be fatter than the ends. Roll out to a length of approximately 22 inches or 55 centimeters. Once you have the dough rope rolled out, I cross over the ends, then twist the ends once more, and then I bring those ends up and press them into the midpoint of the dough rope, spaced out like little arms grabbing a chin-up bar. Don't worry if the spaces are trying to close up on you. Once you've got the pretzel formed, you can wiggle your fingers in there and gently pull the dough so you get the right look. This is the trickiest part of the process, but don't sweat it, because cooking skill is a matter of repetition, and unless you go to work in a German bakery and practice making hundreds of pretzels, we have to accept amateur status. My advice is be careful with adding flour to your work surface. You want the dough to be a little sticky so it grabs and rolls nicely, otherwise it'll just slide. Of course, if it's sticking badly, you should add a tiny dusting of flour, and if your rope breaks, you can reform it. But above all else, don't let yourself get too frustrated. Now I have all my pretzels formed and have them resting on a floured piece of parchment paper on a baking tray. And yes, they might look a little wonky, again, I'm no pro, but making pretzels is an exercise in faith. You will be amazed by the transformation. Give the tops a dusting of flour as well, and then gently cover them with a towel or a sheet of plastic wrap. Now we let those proof for 20 to 30 minutes, or until they are nice and puffed up. Once our dough is close to being fully proofed, bring a pot with 5 cups of water to a simmer. Once the water reaches a simmer, whisk in a 1/4 cup of our baked baking soda. Now let's peek at our pretzels. See how they have swollen up? It's time to poach. I gently pick up my pretzels and slide them into the soda water bath. I give the one side about 15 seconds, flip them, and then give them another 15 seconds, and then remove them from the water and onto a wire baking rack. By the way, I was doing my best to avoid making contact with the chemical bath, but you folks at home should definitely wear some latex gloves. Once you have them all blanched, sprinkle them with some coarse salt all over. Maybe some of you are saying, they look even worse now. But again, have faith. At this point, give the pretzels about 5 minutes to rest on the rack. This just allows them to relax a bit and makes them easier to handle. Once they have cooled slightly, I take a razor blade and make a slit in the fattest part of each pretzel. This helps them keep their shape as they expand in the oven. And now we can move them onto a baking tray lined with parchment paper. And finally, they go into a 220 degrees Celsius, 425 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 15 to 18 minutes, or until they are a beautiful mahogany color all over. They look pretty nice, huh? I bet you had your doubts when they came out of that soda water bath. But this looks like the real deal. Now, as pretty as these are, we still need to give them a good 5 minutes to rest. But then we are free to enjoy. So we have our creamy, pungent cheese spread, our golden, chewy pretzels, and certainly some coarse mustard would be welcome here, as would a nice cold beer. The first time I made pretzels was with a German certified master baker back in culinary school. I hope that Chef Velker would approve of my efforts. Prost to him! So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this dive into the twisted world of pretzels. I know it maybe seemed a little strange with the baking soda, but now you have some ready to go when you make your own ramen noodles. And once you've poached some pretzels, there's no reason why you couldn't handle making your own bagels. And with that in mind, stay tuned. There are many more videos in the pipeline. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Hit me with that thumbs up. Subscribe and watch the catalog of videos expand. You can even help shape the process with feedback. This channel is meant to be for everyone. Until next time, cheers!